Last fall I turned 16 and started my first job at a really small pizza place in my town. It was a family-owned shop with only 5 or 6 people working there. I only got the job because my best friend also worked there. I was the delivery driver, and I only worked during the later hours since I had school during the day. It was around my 3rd week on the job that this happened. The night was pretty regular. It was slow both for deliveries and dining. It was slightly cold out, which kept most people at home. Around 11 though, a call came in. My friend picked up the phone and put in the order. It was for a small pizza and a soda. So they quickly made it, and I hit the road to deliver it. The address wasn't too far, just 8 minutes away. But when I pulled onto the street, I immediately hit a pothole and realized the whole street was cracked and full of potholes. It looked torn apart and completely uncared for. Our town wasn't the nicest, but this was far worse than most places. I carefully drove down, avoiding what I could, until I reached the address. It was a 2-story wooden house. The house looked as old and uncared for as the street, but strangely the yard was full of fresh flowers and plants that clearly had been tended to. I parked at the bottom of the driveway, grabbed the pizza and soda, and walked to the front door. The wooden steps felt like they were going to give out. I got a weird sense of something unsettling. I glanced back at my car, seeing the dense woods behind it, and realizing how isolated this place felt. I knocked. Right after knocking, I heard movement inside, floorboards creaking softly, like someone walking lightly and slowly. The creaking got closer and closer to the door until it sounded like they were right on the other side. I prepared myself by smiling and holding out the pizza, but they didn't open it. After 10 seconds, I got uncomfortable. "Hello, I'm the pizza guy, just delivering your order." No response. No more sounds. That feeling got worse, so I backed off the porch. I still hesitated to leave without them paying, but when I took one last look, my whole body shuddered. A man was standing at the side of the house, staring right at me. He looked like he had been walking toward me, and only stopped when he saw me notice him. He was old, skinny, and had this eerie look in his eyes. I hurried into my car. He didn't say a word. He just watched me. I drove back to the shop. My friend thought maybe it was a prank, but that man was way too old to be pulling something like that. I'm just glad I left when I did, because I don't know what would have happened if he reached the porch before I got out. This was only a month ago. It was late September, and we were getting heavy rain almost every day. It was pouring down that night. I work as an outdoor security guard for a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Rain doesn't make the job any more enjoyable, but luckily the company lets me stay inside on rainy nights. The shift always goes by slower though. Instead of walking around outside, I just stand by the glass entrance doors and watch for anything. I got in at 9. Locking up after all the employees left. It was pouring outside, so I stayed in and stood by the door, trying not to fall asleep. Nothing to see but rain and occasional thunder. A few hours went by. Then, as I stood by the entrance, I heard a deep creaking thud. It echoed through the whole warehouse. It sounded like bending metal or a heavy metal door scraping open. It made the hair stand up on my neck. I told myself it was probably nothing, but it was my job to check. So I walked down the main hallway and looked through each corridor. I never explored much of the warehouse before since I'm usually outside, but I knew there were 5 or 6 large warehouse rooms on each branch of the hallway. I looked down each one until I got to the last. The door at the end was cracked open. A chill ran through me. I walked over and pushed it open. The room was pitch black. "Hello." My voice echoed through the warehouse. A few seconds passed. I started stepping back, ready to close the door, and then I heard it. A voice. A man, either mumbling or softly laughing somewhere in the darkness between the tall shelving units. Is someone there? What the hell are you doing here? I called out. Come here, he said quietly. What? Come here, he said again louder. I still couldn't see anything. I shut the door and backed away fast. I used my radio to call the police and left the building. 5 minutes later, they showed up and walked through everything. They came out alone. Security footage showed a 50-year-old man in a dark jacket slipping in through a gap in one of the back garages. From there, he went straight to the warehouse room I heard him in. And the disturbing part, he was holding some kind of knife. He left a few minutes after I did. No one knows why he broke in or why he was trying to lure me closer. I quit after that and took a day job. I used to spend most of my fall weekends at my uncle's old farmhouse in upstate New York. It wasn't a fancy vacation spot or anything. The place was old, creaky, and always smelled like damp wood. But I liked the quiet after living in the city. The fields around the house were wide and empty most of the year, except for one thing that always bothered me. Across from the back field, tucked just beyond the tree line, there was a small cabin. It wasn't on our land. Nobody ever went near it. My uncle didn't talk about it. When I asked him once, he just said, "Someone owns it," and changed the subject. It looked abandoned though, roof sagging, windows too dark, and a front door that sat slightly open no matter the season. The first time I noticed it was a rainy October night. I was sitting by the kitchen window, listening to the wind push the trees around. The rain came down in sheets, blurring everything at the edge of the field. And in that blur, cabin almost disappeared. Only the faint outline was visible. That night I thought I saw a light flicker inside. Just once. A brief, warm flash like someone struck a match. I stared for a long time, but didn't see it again. I told myself it was nothing. Probably headlights from the road bending through the storm. I slept downstairs that night since the upstairs guest room was freezing. The rain kept pounding the roof. Around 1 in the morning, I woke up to what sounded like footsteps on the back porch. Slow and heavy. Not an animal. Too steady for that. The porch boards creaked in that way it does when someone puts their weight on it. When I sat up, the sound stopped. I listened for a few minutes. Nothing more happened. So I convinced myself it was a branch hitting the siding and tried going back to sleep. I didn't fully sleep though. I kept drifting in and out until around 4, when something thudded lightly against the back door. Not a knock, more like something leaning or sliding against it. I got up, walked to the door as quietly as I could, and looked through the small window above the lock. The porch was empty. Rain was blowing in at an angle. A chair had moved slightly, but it was probably the storm. The next morning, my uncle came in from feeding the chickens and asked if I slept all right. I told him I kept hearing things on the porch. He didn't react much at first. He just nodded a little. But then he asked, "What kind of things?" in this slow, careful tone like he was already expecting something. I said it sounded like footsteps and maybe someone touching the door. He looked toward the field through the window, saw the cabin, and shook his head once, short and quick. "Just animals," he said, but he didn't sound confident. Later that day, I took a walk behind the house to clear my head. The field was muddy and soft from the rain. When I reached the halfway point, I noticed something strange, faint indentations leading from the field toward the back porch. They were spaced too evenly to be from deer, and the shape wasn't right for boots. They weren't full prints, more like heavy dips in the soil, almost like whatever made them didn't have a clear foot shape. They ended at the porch steps. I bent down to look closer, and that's when I felt it. That sensation you get when someone is watching you. I looked up toward the tree line, and the cabin was right there, just barely visible through the thinning fog. The front door was open wider than usual. I swear I saw someone standing just inside it, a faint silhouette. When I blinked, it was gone. I went back to the house faster than I'd like to admit. By the afternoon, the sky turned dark again. Another storm was rolling in. My uncle went into town, said he needed to pick up some feed. He told me to stay inside because the wind was supposed to get rough, and the backfield had standing water in some parts. When the rain finally started, it came down harder than the night before. Everything outside looked washed out and gray. Around 7, the lights flickered and went out completely. Just my luck. I lit a lantern and sat at the kitchen table, listening to the wind shake the gutters. At some point, I heard that same creaking on the porch again, this time slower. I froze. The sound traveled from the far end of the porch to the door. Then it stopped again. I didn't move for minutes. My heart felt too loud in my chest. I kept telling myself not to look, but after a while, curiosity got the best of me. I walked to the door and leaned just enough to look for the top window. Someone was standing at the edge of the yard. They weren't close to the porch, but close enough that I could make out the shape of a head and shoulders. No umbrella, no coat, just a tall figure standing in the rain, facing the house. They didn't move. I stepped back from the window and grabbed the only thing near me, a fireplace poker. I don't know what I thought I'd do with it, but holding it made me feel less helpless. The figure stayed there for a long time, long enough that I started wondering if I imagined it. The rain made everything look strange. Shadows moved where they shouldn't, so I forced myself to check again. The figure was gone, but now the cabin across the field had a light inside it. Not a bright one, just a faint, warm glow like a candle. That's when the phone rang, and that made my stomach drop. The house phone never rings. My uncle barely uses it, and during storms, the landline usually goes dead anyway. I picked it up. There was no one on the other end. Just rain. Not static. Not breathing. Just the sound of rain, like someone was holding the phone outside. Then the call cut off. I didn't move for a long time. I think part of me was waiting for it to ring again, but it didn't. Then the porch creaked again. A single step this time. The second that porch board creaked again, I froze. It was just one step, like someone shifted their weight or moved a few inches closer to the door. I kept the fireplace poker in my hand, but it felt more like a toy at that point. Whatever was out there wasn't scared of a piece of metal. I stood there in the dark for maybe 30 seconds, listening. The storm made it impossible to tell what was wind and what wasn't. But then I heard that slow, dragging sound across the porch floorboards. It wasn't footsteps. It was something else. Something heavier. Something sliding. I backed away from the door and moved to the other side of the room. I didn't sit. I didn't even blink much. I just stared toward the porch and waited. The dragging stopped. No more movement after that. The house went quiet again, except for the rain on the windows. I stayed like that for a long time, and eventually, the tension faded just enough that I could breathe normally again. I told myself it was probably a loose gutter or the wind shifting something around. Anything normal. Anything that would let me sleep that night. Around 10, my uncle still wasn't back from town. I kept looking at the driveway, hoping to see headlights, but nothing came through the storm. I thought about calling him, but after that weird phone call earlier, I didn't want to hear the phone ring again. Eventually, I brought the lantern into the living room and laid down on the couch. I didn't fall asleep right away. My brain kept replaying that figure in the yard. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it standing in the rain again, facing the house like it was waiting. I must have dozed off at some point, because the next thing I remember was waking up to a soft, steady tapping. It didn't sound like the porch. It came from one of the windows. I stayed on the couch, too scared to move. The tapping grew a little louder and a little quicker. I turned my head toward the sound, and I felt my whole body tense up. It was the window right by the kitchen table. I didn't get up. I didn't even breathe right. I just stared at the silhouette behind the curtains. The lantern was dim, but you could still make out shapes through fabric. Whoever was outside was tall, taller than I expected. The tapping wasn't knuckles. It was a flat surface, like fingers or maybe even someone's whole hand. Then the tapping stopped. The shadow didn't move. It just stayed there. A few seconds passed. Then the porch creaked again. This time, from the far end, like someone stepped off the window ledge and walked back toward the door. I got up slowly and moved behind a support beam where I could see both the window and the porch without being seen. I held the poker tighter, even though it did nothing to calm me down. Then I heard something I still remember clearly, because it didn't fit anything else that night. 3 knocks. Not on the door, not on the window, on the wall itself. Slow, spaced out, and heavy. Like someone standing inches from the siding just tapped their knuckles against the inside of the wall. I stayed behind that beam until the lantern burned down almost completely. No more knocks. No more tapping. No more movement. Just rain. Right around 3 in the morning, I finally worked up enough courage to check outside from the small upstairs window. I crept up as quietly as possible. When I reached the window, I wiped the fog off with my sleeve and looked out toward the field. The figure was standing there again. Same spot as before. Same distance from the house. Facing me. I stepped back so fast I nearly fell. When I looked again, it was still there. The only difference was the light in the cabin across the field. It was brighter now, not flickering. Just a steady glow like something was burning inside. I kept staring at it, and eventually I noticed something new. The cabin door was fully open, and the light wasn't coming from inside the walls. It was coming from the floor, like the ground inside the cabin was lit up. Around 4, the figure finally moved. It turned around slowly and walked back toward the cabin. It didn't walk like a normal person. No rise and fall in the steps. No shifting of weight. Just a smooth, steady movement across the wet field. I watched until it vanished behind the first row of trees. The second it disappeared, the cabin light went out, and everything went pitch black. My uncle came home just after dawn. I was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with the cold lantern next to me. When he walked in, first thing he said was, "You didn't sleep." I told him everything. The figure, the tapping, the knocks, the weird footprints, the light in the cabin. He didn't interrupt me, but the more I talked, the more his face tightened. When I finished, he sat down across from me and didn't say anything for a minute. Then he said something that stuck with me. "I should have told you a long time ago, but that cabin isn't really a cabin." I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer at first. He rubbed his hands over his face like he was trying to wake up from something. Then he said, "It used to be part of the old property, before my father bought this place. But even back then, nobody lived there. Not officially. People saw things out there all the time. Lights, shadows, someone standing in the doorway. Same as you." I asked him if anyone ever went inside. He shook his head. They tried. They never stayed long. He told me a story about the man who built the cabin. If you could even call it that. The guy lived alone, barely talked to anyone, and disappeared one fall night in the late 60s. After that, the door stayed open all year round. People who went close said it felt wrong, like you were walking into a place that wasn't really empty. My uncle never went near it after something happened in his 20s. Something he wouldn't tell me. He just said, "It's better if you don't look at that place too long, and never at night." I asked him if he thought the figure came from there. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I packed my bag that same morning and left before the sun finished rising. The field was covered in a thin layer of fog, and the cabin was barely visible, but the door was shut now. I haven't been back since. My uncle moved out last year. When I asked him why, he just said, "Too many fall nights." This happened 2 years ago, late October. It was snowing by then. I live in a small one-bedroom apartment with my dog Milo. Not the best place, but not the worst. 8 units total. Pretty quiet. That night, I got home at 6:30. Took Milo out, made dinner, and played video games with my friends. I stayed up later than planned. Around 12, I finally got off. The whole apartment was dark except for my monitor. Feeling tired, I leashed Milo and went to the back courtyard so he could do his business. It was freezing out and the ground was covered in snow. The courtyard had a few lamps, so most areas were dim. As I waited, I looked up at my apartment window. My blinds were partially open, and I could see the light from my computer screen. Then something moved. The amount of light coming through the blinds changed, like something had been blocking it a moment ago. I muttered, "What the hell?" My heart sank. Someone had to be standing behind the window. I yanked Milo's leash and hurried inside, up to my unit on the second floor. The hallway was silent. I crept to my door. I never lock it when quickly taking Milo out, since I'm gone less than a minute. Still, someone walking in that fast seemed unlikely. I opened the door. Everything looked normal. Doggy gate still in the same place. Living room empty. Dark apartment. Then I looked down the hallway to my bedroom. Pure darkness. I couldn't even see the door. I told myself maybe I imagined it. Maybe the AC moved the blinds. I stepped forward, but Milo didn't move. He stood by the entrance, staring down the hallway, growling. A low growl I'd never heard from him. I followed his gaze. That's when I saw it. A faint outline of someone standing at the end of the hall. And the only clear thing, their eyes. Open, staring at me. My body jerked backward, and I bolted out the door with Milo. I called the cops outside. They found a guy hiding in my bedroom. Middle-aged, sickly looking. Wouldn't explain anything. The scariest part was thinking about how long he'd been inside. I took Milo out when I first got home, and again before bed. The only times the door was unlocked. He could have been in my apartment for 6 hours. I still think about that. I was camping with a friend of mine in rural Washington. I'll call him Chase. We found the spot on an app. Middle of fall. Cold but beautiful. No one else there. The first night went fine. Next morning, we hiked up to a peak nearby and came back around noon. When we got back, someone was standing at Chase's tent. Just standing there. Chase called out. The guy looked startled and hurried away without saying anything. It was weird. We checked for missing gear, but nothing was touched. We figured maybe we scared him off before he could take anything. Still weird though. We stayed close to camp the rest of the day. When the sun went down, we made a fire and relaxed. After a while, Chase got up to pee in the woods. He came back seconds later, walking fast. There was someone there, he said. He didn't see their face, just the outline of a man standing in the trees watching him. That freaked us out. We grabbed flashlights. The man was gone. We sat near the fire, checking the woods constantly. Chase was convinced it was the same guy from earlier. And the creepy part? Why come back? If he wanted to rob us, he would have done it earlier. We packed up and decided to leave even though it was dark. Walking down the trail, we kept checking behind us. Never saw him. We thought we were in the clear. Then we reached my car. All 4 tires were slashed. My stomach dropped. That basically confirmed he didn't want us leaving that night. We heard leaves crunching behind us. We didn't look. We jumped in the car and drove, destroying my wheels on the way out. Later, police checked for prints, but found nothing. The man never tried entering the car. He just slashed the tires. Whatever he had planned, we didn't want to find out. It was late fall, the day after Halloween. I had the day off, but was exhausted from a party the night before. I laid down for a nap at 2 p.m. and accidentally slept until 9 p.m. The doorbell woke me. I answered late, so when I opened the door and saw nobody, I figured they walked away. But as I was closing it, I noticed someone standing by a tree in my yard. They wore a cheap Halloween mask, just staring at me. I thought it was a kid messing around, so I shut the door. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, then went to the kitchen to clean up. After about 10 minutes, I heard a muffled voice outside. I looked at the back door. Someone was walking through my backyard. They stayed just outside the porch light, like they were deliberately avoiding the light. I thought maybe they were talking to someone, but I couldn't see anyone else. Then they came closer. Their footsteps moved to the side of the house. I followed the sound, then lost it. Silence. I kept listening and turned around to check the back door again. Someone was staring at me through the glass, wearing the same mask, but a different person. Taller, bigger. "What the hell are you guys doing?" I yelled. They didn't answer. They moved out of view. Then behind me, a crack. Footsteps sprinting away. I ran to that window and lifted the blinds. A chunk of the wooden window frame was split off. They were trying to pry it open while I was distracted by the one at the back door. I ran upstairs and called 911. The police came, but the two masked people were gone. Nothing was stolen. They were clearly trying to break in. Still no answers. For years ago in late October, I started a new job at a gas station. My friends had a big Halloween party, but since I had no vacation time, I had to work the night shift. I went in at 8. Roads were quiet since kids were trick-or-treating. I hoped it wouldn't be busy. Thankfully, the first hour was slow. By 10, even fewer cars came in. I saw a police car pass every 15 minutes, but otherwise it was dead. I got bored scrolling on my phone, seeing everyone else having fun, so I grabbed some boxes from the back to restock the shelves. As my back was turned, the bell over the door rang. I turned and saw 3 men walking in. They were wearing full Halloween costumes with masks. One was dressed as Michael Myers. The other 2 were costumes I didn't recognize. I could tell they weren't kids. They were grown adults. So these 3 guys come into the gas station. Masks, full costumes, and adult-sized. The Michael Myers one looks totally serious, like he just stepped out of a horror movie. The other 2, I couldn't tell if they were clowns or some other creepy costume. They glance around slowly, like they're sizing up the place. I drop what I'm doing and walk over, trying to stay calm. I ask, "Can I help you?" in the most casual way I can muster. One of them laughs, but it's not a joke laugh. It's low, quiet. He just nods, points to the snacks section. The Myers guy stays by the door, silent, still watching everything. The third guy is fiddling with the air fresheners by the counter. I try to shrug it off, thinking maybe they're just messing around. Halloween night and all that. But there's something off. Their movements are too slow, too deliberate. I go back to stocking the shelves, but I keep watching them out of the corner of my eye. The one by the air fresheners moves to the chips. He picks up a bag, then slowly puts it back. Doesn't take anything. Michael Myers is still by the door, just standing. And the third guy, he's not buying. No snacks, no drinks. After a few minutes, the three of them stop what they're doing. They all look at me together, like they made some silent decision. Then they just walk out. No words. No thank you. No bye. Just out. The second the door shuts behind them, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The bell rings again, but no one else comes in. Just silence. I finish the rest of my shift, but I keep glancing over at the door, expecting them to come back. They don't. When I lock up at the end of the night, I go home feeling shaken. I tell my friends what happened, but they laugh and say, "Dude, it's just Halloween costumes. People mess around on Halloween." But I don't buy that. I remember how the one guy laughed. Not a joke laugh. Something colder. To this day, I don't know who those guys were, or why they came in. I've never seen them before or since. For one Halloween night, though, they turned a boring gas station shift into something straight out of a horror film.